He knelt in front of a portrait of his own dying bloodline and made a choice that should have been impossible. Marry a stranger in 3 days. Or lose everything he was, not metaphorically, his wolf, his mind, himself. She was a hospice nurse with an empty bank account and a sister running out of time. He was an alpha with 30 days left and a curse older than his family's oldest grave. Neither of them wanted this marriage. Both of them needed it to be a lie. But on their wedding night, something in the trees answered his call for the first time in weeks, and it wasn't his wolf that answered it. It was hers. Because the woman he married for convenience carries the exact bloodline that cursed him 120 years ago. The same blood that could break the curse completely, or kill her trying. She doesn't know it yet. He's terrified to tell her. And somewhere in the dark, a rival alpha is already counting down the same 30 days, waiting for exactly one of them to fail. One marriage, one curse, 30 days to fall in love or lose each other forever. Here's what happens when the wrong choice becomes the only choice. Chapter 1. The letter came on a Tuesday, tucked between a hospital bill and a coupon for cat food she didn't own. Wren Calloway almost threw it away with the rest of the junk mail. It was the paper that stopped her. Thick, cream-colored, the kind that cost more than everything else in her mailbox combined. No return address, just her name, typed in a clean, deliberate font, like whoever sent it had known exactly who they were looking for. She sat down at the kitchen table before she opened it. Some instinct told her she'd need to be sitting. Miss Calloway, you have been selected for a private arrangement of significant financial benefit. A marriage contract, 6 months in duration, compensation of $200,000 upon completion. Discretion required. A car will arrive Thursday at 9 a.m. should you wish to proceed. No obligation if you decline. There was no name, no company letterhead, just an address on the back, a P.O. box 2 towns over, and a single line beneath it. We know about Callie. Wren read it 3 times before she let herself breathe. Upstairs, through the thin ceiling of the apartment she'd been renting since her mother disappeared 14 years ago, she could hear the soft hum of her sister's oxygen concentrator. Callie had been sick since spring, some rare, cruel thing the doctors kept renaming every time they ran out of ideas. And the machines that kept her breathing cost more each week than Wren made in a month at the hospice, where she spent her days holding strangers' hands while they died and telling herself it counted as purpose. $200,000. It wasn't a number. It was a roof that didn't leak. It was a specialist in Denver who'd actually returned her calls once, before the deposit requirement made the conversation moot. It was Callie, alive, past 19, past 20, past whatever arbitrary age the universe had apparently decided was enough. She climbed the stairs and found Callie propped up against a wall of pillows, laptop balanced on her knees, looking paler than she had that morning, but still managing a grin when Wren appeared in the doorway. "You look like you saw a ghost," Callie said. "Junk mail," Wren lied, folding the letter into her back pocket. "How are you feeling?" "Like a girl who wants Thai food her sister can't afford?" Callie's eyes narrowed, sharper than her body had any right to be. "Wren, your face." "I'm fine. You're doing the thing where you lie to me to protect me, which we've discussed extensively is not a thing you're allowed to do anymore." Wren sat on the edge of the bed and took her sister's hand, thin now in a way that still didn't feel real, no matter how many months she'd had to get used to it. "I might have a job opportunity," she said carefully. "Out of town. Good money." "How good?" Good enough that Dr. Alvarez in Denver stopped screening my calls. Callie went quiet, and for a moment the only sound in the room was the concentrator's patient hiss. What kind of job pays that well, Wren? The kind I don't ask too many questions about. She squeezed her sister's hand before Callie could push further. I'll tell you everything once I know more. I promise. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of her, turning the two words over and over. We know. Until they stopped feeling like a threat and started feeling like the only honest offer anyone had made her in years. By morning, she'd made her decision. The car arrived at 9 a.m. exactly, which should have told her something. Black, unmarked, the kind of car that existed only in the part of the world she'd never had access to. The woman who stepped out to open the door for her didn't introduce herself right away. She was maybe 30, dark-haired, dressed like she was attending a funeral she had no intention of crying at. Rhea, she said finally, once they were on the highway and the city had thinned into trees. I run security for the Voss family. You'll be seeing a lot of me. Voss, Wren repeated. Is that his name? The man I'm supposed to marry? Rhea's eyes flicked to her in the rear-view mirror, unreadable. You didn't ask before you signed? I didn't get a chance to ask anything. I got a letter with 2 words on the back of it and I got in the car. That's usually how it goes. Wren tried a different angle. What's he like? Kane. Complicated, Rhea said, after a pause long enough to mean something. You'll see for yourself in a few hours. I'd rather not color it. That's not ominous at all. Something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched Rhea's mouth. You'll do fine. Or you won't. Either way, it's not really my business. Wren pressed her forehead to the window and watched the trees thicken as they climbed. 2 hours became 3. The road narrowed, hemmed in on both sides by pines so tall they blotted out the afternoon light. No other cars, no houses, just the occasional flash of a security camera bolted high in a tree, watching the road like it was waiting for something. Ashwood territory, Rhea said when Wren asked. Private land, has been for generations. Territory, Wren said slowly. That's a strange word for it. Rhea didn't answer that one. They passed through a gate that opened without anyone touching it, and then the house rose out of the trees like something conjured rather than built. Stone and glass, 3 stories, wrapped in ivy, lit gold against a sky just beginning to purple with dusk. He was waiting on the steps. She knew it was him before Rhea said a word, because the whole world seemed to organize itself around where he was standing. Tall, dark hair cut close, a build that suggested he'd earned it doing something other than sitting behind a desk. He watched the car approach with an expression so carefully blank that Wren understood immediately it was a mask. His eyes found hers immediately, gray, sharp, and for one unguarded second, something flickered behind them that looked almost like relief before it vanished back beneath the mask. You're not what I pictured, he said. Neither are you, Wren said, because it was true, and because she refused to let a stranger see her hands shake. Kane Voss, he said, and didn't offer his hand. Wren Calloway. She didn't offer hers either. He studied her for a long moment, like he was checking her against some private list of qualifications she hadn't known she was being tested for. His jaw tightened slightly, and he turned toward the house. Come inside. We have things to discuss before Thursday. The study was lined with books that looked older than the country. Kane didn't sit right away. He stood by the window instead, back to her. "I need to be honest with you about something," he said finally. "Not everything, but something." "All right." "This isn't a normal marriage. It isn't going to feel like one, and I need you to understand, before Thursday, that whatever happens between us, it ends. Cleanly. No complications. Can you agree to that?" Wren thought about Callie's oxygen concentrator humming through the ceiling of an apartment 2 hours and an entire universe away. "I can agree to that," she said. "Can I ask you something in return? Why me? There must be 100 women who'd say yes to this without asking a single question." "Because you didn't ask a single question until you were already sitting in front of me. That told me more than an interview would have." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now." He set a folder in front of her, a date circled in red ink. "Read it tonight." He hesitated at the door. "Wren?" It was the first time he'd said her name. It landed strangely, like something warm dropped into cold water. "Whatever you hear tonight," he said, "whatever you think you hear, it's nothing. Old house, old land. It settles." He left before she could ask what he meant. That night, alone in a guest room larger than her entire apartment, Wren read every page of the contract twice, signed where the tabs indicated, and lay awake long after the ink had dried. Somewhere past midnight, the house began, unmistakably, to settle. It started low, rising through the trees like something being unwound. Then it climbed, long and mournful, answered from somewhere much closer than she wanted to think about, and then again from a third direction entirely, until the whole mountainside seemed to be singing in a language she had no business understanding and yet, somehow, impossibly, almost did. She told herself it was coyotes. She didn't believe herself for a single second. Down the hall, Kane Voss stood at his own window, knuckles white against the frame, watching the tree line and waiting, the way he'd waited every night for 3 weeks now, for a wolf that no longer fully answered when he called it. He didn't know yet that the answer to that particular problem was asleep 2 doors down. Thursday was coming. Neither of them was ready for what it would cost. Chapter 2. The wedding took 11 minutes. There were no guests, no music, no procession, nothing that resembled the day Wren had once imagined for herself, back when she still let herself imagine things like weddings at all. A judge she'd never met before that morning stood at a plain stone altar set up in the garden behind the house, reading words from a folder in a voice that suggested he'd done this exact ceremony more times than he cared to count, and had stopped being curious about the reasons why long ago. The only guests were Rhea, standing off to one side with her arms crossed and her expression unreadable, and a handful of others Wren hadn't been introduced to. A broad-shouldered man with a scar through one eyebrow who kept glancing toward the tree line like he expected something to come out of it. An older woman who watched Wren with an intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like an assessment. A teenage boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Nobody smiled. Nobody cried. Kane stood beside her in a dark suit, jaw tight, eyes fixed somewhere over the judge's shoulder, like he couldn't quite look at her and get through this at the same time. Up close, in daylight, she could see a faint scar along his collarbone, just visible above his collar, and the way his hands, when they weren't clasped carefully in front of him, seemed to want to curl into fists. "You may exchange rings." Rhea stepped forward with a small velvet box, and for a moment Wren watched something pass between her and Kane. Not quite a warning, not quite reassurance. His hands were warm, steadier than hers. When he slid the band onto her finger, his thumb grazed her knuckle. An accident, surely, and something low in her stomach turned over anyway. "You may kiss the bride." Then Kane leaned in, and it wasn't the polite, practiced kiss she'd braced herself for. His mouth brushed hers, soft and brief, but his hand came up to her jaw as he did it, fingers curling gently along her cheek like some instinct older than the contract between them had taken the wheel. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. It felt considerably longer. He pulled back first, cleared his throat, stepped away like the whole thing hadn't happened. "Rhea will show you to your room," he said, already retreating. Wren pressed 2 fingers to her lips once his back was turned and told herself it meant nothing. She didn't quite believe herself. There was no reception. Rhea walked her through the house, pointing out rooms with the flat efficiency of someone who'd given this tour a dozen times. Kitchen, library, Kane's study, off limits unless he invites you in himself. Rhea paused at a set of double doors near the back. "That's the pack hall. You won't need it. Not yet." "Pack," Wren repeated. "You people really commit to the theme." Something flickered across Rhea's face. "It's not a theme." She kept walking before Wren could ask what that meant. At the top of the staircase, Rhea slowed. "Your room's this way. His is at the end of the hall. Separate, for now." "For now," Wren repeated. "For what it's worth, he's not a bad man. Whatever this is, whatever he's not telling you, he's not doing it to hurt anyone." "That's not exactly reassuring." "No," Rhea agreed. "I don't imagine it is." She left Wren at a bedroom door bigger than her entire apartment back home. Wren sat on the edge of the enormous bed and cried. Not from sadness, exactly, but from the sheer, dizzying strangeness of a life that had rearranged itself completely in under a week. She called Callie that evening, keeping her voice bright. "I got married today," she didn't say. "To a stranger. For money. And when he kissed me, I felt something I have no right to feel." "You sound weird," Callie said, suspicious even through the phone. "I'm tired. Long drive." "Uh-huh. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right?" "Nothing's wrong," Wren said, and hated how easily the lie came now that she'd had practice. She couldn't sleep. Around midnight, she went looking for water and found a light on in the kitchen. Kane sat at the long table, suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, a glass of something amber untouched in front of him. "Couldn't sleep either," she said. "Not in a while, no." He nodded toward the empty chair. She took it. "Can I ask you something? You can say no." "You can ask." "That scar." She nodded toward his collarbone. "It's not from anything ordinary, is it?" Something shuddered behind his eyes. "No, it's not." "Are you going to tell me what it's from?" "Not tonight. Ask me again in a few weeks. Maybe by then I'll have found a way to say it that doesn't sound insane." "That's an oddly specific caveat." "You have no idea," he said, something almost like a real smile pulling at his mouth before he put it away again. He stood, taking his untouched drink with him. "You should get some sleep." He was gone before she could ask what tonight had been then, if not easy. That night, alone in bed, she heard it again. A long, low howl, rising through the trees, answered by a second, then a third, until the whole mountainside seemed to be singing in some register just beneath language. She got up and went to the window. Moonlight silvered the tree line, and for one impossible second, she thought she saw movement between the trunks, something large, low to the ground, moving with a grace no coyote possessed. It paused once at the edge of the clearing, and for the length of a heartbeat, Wren could have sworn it was looking directly up at her window. She told herself it was her imagination. She didn't believe herself for a second. Down the hall, Kane Voss stood at his own window, knuckles white against the frame, watching the tree line and waiting, the way he'd waited every night for 3 weeks now, for a wolf that hadn't fully answered his call since the curse took hold. Tonight, something in his chest had stirred when his ring found her finger. Small, fragile, nowhere near enough to matter, not against 30 days and a curse older than either of them. But there, all the same. Chapter 3. Morning came gray and quiet, mist pooling low across the lawn outside her window, and for a moment, waking in the enormous bed, Wren forgot where she was. Then her hand shifted against the sheets, and the ring caught the light, and the whole strange weight of the last 3 days settled back over her like a coat she hadn't asked to wear. She found Kane in the kitchen already, standing at the counter with a mug of coffee he wasn't drinking, dressed like a man about to go to war rather than a man who'd been married less than 12 hours. He didn't look like he'd slept. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday morning, and when he turned to look at her, it took him a fraction of a second too long to focus. "There are rules," he said without preamble, sliding a mug across the counter to her. "I should have gone over them before the wedding. I didn't think we'd get this far, honestly, so I'm behind." "That's reassuring." "It's practical." He folded his arms. 1. You don't go past the tree line without Rhea or me. Not during the day, and never after dark. "Why?" "Because I said so is not an answer I'm allowed to give you, apparently, but it's the truest one I have right now. 2. If anyone from outside the property asks who you are, you're my wife, nothing more. If someone asks, you fell in love fast and eloped. People believe stupid stories more easily than complicated true ones." "You'd know." That almost got a smile out of him. 3. The pack hall is off limits until I say otherwise. Not because you're not welcome there eventually, because there are things happening in this house right now that I need time to explain properly. Wren wrapped both hands around the warm mug. "You're very good at telling me what I can't do. You're less good at telling me why." "I know." He rubbed a hand over his face, and for just a moment, the mask slipped enough that she saw exhaustion so deep it looked structural, like it had been holding the rest of him upright for longer than was reasonable. "I'm asking you to trust rules you don't understand yet. I'm not in a position to offer you anything better right now." "Okay," she said. "For now." "For now," he repeated, relief passing over his face before he reached for his coffee, missing the handle by half an inch before his fingers found it. A small thing, but Wren noticed it anyway, the way she'd been trained to notice small things at the hospice. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Fine," she said too fast, in the exact tone Callie used every single time she wasn't. By afternoon, restless, she wandered the grounds alone, careful to stay within sight of the windows. She found the broad-shouldered man from the wedding chopping wood near a shed at the tree line's edge. "You're the new Mrs. Voss," he said, not looking up. "Wren. And you are?" "Torin." He studied her with the same frank assessment she was getting used to. "You're braver than you look, coming out here alone." Should I not be? Depends what you're afraid of. Something wry crossed his face. Most people who marry into this family already know what they're marrying into. You're the first one in a long time who didn't. That seems like an oversight someone should correct. It's not my place. Ask him. Soon. Whatever you're imagining right now, it's probably not as strange as the truth, but it's also not as bad as you might be building it up to be in your head. Rhea found her an hour later on the back terrace, watching mist burn off the tree line while Kane disappeared into his study with two men Wren hadn't met. He tell you the rules? Rhea asked. Some of them. The parts that sound like a hostage situation mostly. Rhea almost smiled. There are people who'd use you against him if they knew you mattered to him at all. I don't matter to him. We've been married a day. Rhea was quiet a moment. Not everyone here trusts you yet. Sable, especially, the older woman from the wedding, finally given a name, thinks Kane moved too fast. This family's been burned before, by people who came in looking harmless. I'm here because my sister is dying, and someone offered me enough money to maybe stop that. I know. I believe you. Just give it time. Through the study window, Wren caught a glimpse of Kane leaning heavily against his desk, one hand braced flat against the wood like a man steadying himself against a wind only he could feel. He straightened immediately, composure snapping back into place, and Wren looked away before he could catch her watching. Whatever was happening to him, it was getting worse. She saw the truth of it that evening, by accident. She found him in the hallway outside his study, one hand braced against the wall, breathing like a man who'd just run a great distance, though he hadn't moved from that spot in what looked like several minutes. Kane? He straightened too fast. She watched the color drain out of his face, watched his knees threaten to buckle before he caught himself against the doorframe. I'm fine, he said before she'd even asked. You're not. She crossed the hall and got a hand under his arm before she'd fully decided to, and he let her, which told her more than his words did. Up close, his eyes had gone strange in the dim light. Not quite the sharp gray she remembered, something duller underneath, like a lamp burning low on fuel. What is happening to you? I told you. Not tonight. You said that 2 nights ago. And I'll probably say it again tomorrow. He managed something almost like a smile, though it cost him visibly. I need you to trust me a little longer, Wren. I know I haven't earned that yet. I'm asking anyway. She wanted, badly, to push, but his hand had found hers on his arm and he wasn't letting go. Okay, she said again, softer this time. For now. For now, he agreed, and let her walk him the rest of the way to his room. If his steps were unsteady the whole way there, neither of them said a word about it. Whatever those secrets were, she was beginning to suspect the rules weren't really about protecting the pack from her at all. They were about protecting her from finding out what those secrets were costing him. Chapter 4. He found her before she found him, which surprised her more than it should have. She was in the library, 3 days after the wedding, pulling a book at random off a shelf just to have something to do with her hands, when Kane appeared in the doorway looking like a man who'd made a decision and was afraid of losing his nerve before he could act on it. Come with me, he said. I need to show you something, and then I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you decide I'm insane. That's an ominous way to start a conversation. It's an honest one, which is the point. He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. He led her not toward the pack hall, as she half expected, but outside, down a stone path she hadn't noticed before, winding away from the house toward a smaller building at the edge of the tree line, a converted chapel, ivy-strangled and old, with a heavy wooden door that Kane unlocked with a key he wore on a chain around his neck, tucked beneath his shirt where she'd never seen it. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old stone and older secrets. Portraits lined the walls. Generations of Voss men and women, Wren realized, going back further than the paint could reasonably have survived, each one with the same sharp gray eyes Kane had. "My family has led this pack for 200 years, Kane said, his voice low in the hush of the space. Werewolves, Wren. Not a metaphor, not a theme like you said to Rhea." A ghost of a smile gone as fast as it appeared. "The howls you've been hearing, the rules, the scar on my collarbone, it's all the same story, and I should have told you the day you arrived instead of making you piece it together in the dark." Wren didn't laugh. She wanted to. Some reflexive, self-protective urge rose in her chest and died there, because nothing about his face suggested a joke, and nothing about the last 4 days had actually made sense any other way. "Okay," she said slowly. "Say I believe you. What does that have to do with the way you've been fading since Thursday?" Something in his expression cracked open, relief and grief tangled together. "You noticed." "I notice everything. It's the job." He led her deeper into the chapel, to a portrait near the back, a man with Kane's exact eyes and a woman beside him with dark, unreadable eyes of her own. 120 years ago, Kane said, an Ashwood ancestor of mine betrayed a family called Rourke, broke a mating bond, took land that wasn't his, started a war that lasted 3 generations. Before the last Rourke matriarch died, she cursed the Ashwood bloodline. Every alpha, for as long as the line continued, would be given 30 days once the curse activated. 30 days to bind himself to a true mate or lose his wolf entirely, and lose himself along with it. And it's active, now, in you. 3 weeks ago. He said it plainly, like a man who'd practiced saying it and still couldn't make it sound less impossible. "I'm losing my night vision first, then strength, then, eventually, the wolf itself, which for us isn't losing an ability, Wren. It's losing half of what we are. Most alphas who reach the end of the 30 days don't survive it." The room tilted slightly around her. "And marrying me was supposed to buy me time. A binding, even a false one, slows the progression. It doesn't stop it." His jaw worked. "I lied to you about that too, a little. Not about the marriage being fake, about how much I understood what fake would and wouldn't fix." Wren sat down hard on a wooden pew that had probably seated 100 years of Ashwood funerals. "Say something," Kane said, after a silence that had stretched long enough to feel dangerous. "I'm trying to decide if you're insane or if I am for believing you." She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. "Werewolves. A curse. 30 days. You're telling me I married into a fairy tale and nobody thought to mention the part where it might kill you." "I know how it sounds." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like the plot of every ridiculous thing I used to read under the covers with a flashlight, except you're actually dying in front of me, which makes it considerably less charming." "I'm aware." Something dry flickered across his face, gone as fast as it came. "Believe me, I've had 3 weeks to find the humor in it, and I haven't managed yet." "So you married a stranger for money, knowing the marriage itself couldn't save you. I married you because I was running out of options and out of time. And some instinct I didn't examine very hard told me you were worth the risk anyway. He crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see exactly how tired his eyes had become. I wasn't going to tell you any of this. I was going to let you think it was old house nonsense and let the 6 months run out and let you go home with your money, curse or no curse. But you keep noticing things I don't want you to notice. And I'd rather you know the truth and hate me for the lie than keep watching you try to solve a puzzle I built specifically to be unsolvable. I don't hate you, Wren said, surprising herself with how immediately true it felt. You might, once I tell you the last part. There's a last part? So what does fix it? He hesitated long enough that she already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. A true mate bond, not paperwork, not a ceremony. Something that has to be real and chosen and can't be forced or faked or rushed, which is the cruelest part of the whole curse, if you ask me. And if it doesn't happen? If the 30 days just run out? Then I lose the wolf, and whatever's left of me afterward isn't enough to hold a pack together. Torin takes over. Rhea keeps what she can of the family intact. Sable's been telling everyone for weeks it's already decided, that I should be preparing them instead of chasing a fix I don't actually believe in. His voice didn't waver, but something underneath it did. I've spent 3 weeks refusing to believe there wasn't a way through this, and I'm no closer to one than I was the day it started. That's not true, Wren said quietly. You found me. I found a stranger and asked her to marry me for money. That's not the same as finding an answer. Isn't it? He reached into his jacket and produced a photograph, worn soft at the edges, and set it in her hands with the care of a man handling something that might detonate. It was faded, the color gone slightly amber with age, taken decades ago, showing a young woman standing in front of the very chapel they were sitting in now. Dark hair, sharp, unreadable eyes, a wariness in her posture that looked less like a photograph and more like a woman who knew she was being documented and hadn't wanted to be. Wren's whole body went cold before her mind caught up to why. She knew that face. She'd looked at it every day for the first 12 years of her life, in a smaller, sadder version, hanging on the wall of an apartment that no longer existed. That's my mother, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Before I was even born. Why is my mother standing in front of your family's chapel? I don't know the whole story, Kane admitted. Only that my father kept this photograph locked away with the pack's oldest records, and that the woman in it has the same eyes as the family that cursed us. I didn't understand why until I saw you get out of that car 3 days ago, and realized I already knew your face somehow, before I'd ever met you. Wren stared at the photograph until the edges of it blurred. You think my mother was a Rourke? I think, Kane said carefully, that you might be the reason this curse can finally be broken. And I think that terrifies me almost as much as it should terrify you. The chapel was very quiet. Outside, somewhere past the tree line, a single wolf began to howl, and this time, neither of them pretended it was anything else. Chapter 5. The pack gathered every full moon at a clearing half a mile past the tree line, and this month, for the first time in the history of Ashwood territory as far as anyone could remember, An outsider was invited to stand inside the circle instead of watching it from a window. "You don't have to go," Kane told her that afternoon, though the tightness in his jaw suggested he wanted her there more than he was willing to say outright. "Sable will use it against you if you falter. Pack gatherings aren't subtle. Everyone will be watching to see if you belong." "Do I belong?" "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out with you instead of without you." She wore a dark green dress Rhea had produced from somewhere without explanation, and let Rhea braid her hair back with hands that had gone, in the 4 days since the chapel, from merely tolerant to something closer to protective. "Chin up tonight," Rhea said. "Whatever anyone tests you with, you don't flinch. Wolves respect steadiness more than they respect strength." The clearing, when they reached it, took her breath away. A bonfire taller than she was threw gold light against a wall of dark pines, and perhaps 40 people stood or sat around it until Kane appeared at the tree line with Wren's hand in his, and the whole gathering went quiet at once. "Alpha," someone murmured, and the word rippled outward through the crowd. Sable approached first, silver-streaked hair loose around her shoulders, eyes sharp as flint in the firelight. "So, the stranger who married our Alpha in 11 minutes. I was there. It was closer to 12, honestly." Something almost like amusement flickered behind Sable's guarded expression. "There's a version of this where the curse ends, and it isn't a happy one, Miss Calloway. I'm not telling you this to frighten you off. I'm telling you because someone should." Before Wren could answer, a ripple moved through the crowd, dozens of heads turning toward the far tree line at once. A man stood at the edge of the firelight, uninvited, flanked by 2 others who weren't Ashwood Pack. Tall, fair-haired, handsome in a way that felt deliberate. His eyes, when they found Wren's, held an interest that made her skin crawl. "Callum," Kane said, stepping half in front of her. "I heard you'd married. I confess, I didn't believe it until I saw her myself." Callum's gaze slid over Wren. "Calloway, is it? You have your mother's eyes. Did you know that?" The clearing went utterly silent. "You knew my mother," Wren said, before she could stop herself. "I knew of her. Before she vanished with a piece of my family's history she had no right to take." Callum's smile sharpened. "I wonder if she ever told you what you are, Miss Calloway. I wonder if Kane has, for that matter." "That's enough," Kane said. "It's not enough at all, but it's a start." Callum turned to go. "I'll see you both again before the 30 days are through." He melted back into the tree line as easily as he'd appeared, and the clearing exhaled all at once. Kane turned to her, something raw and apologetic in his eyes. "That's Callum Rourke. I should have warned you he might come tonight." "He knew my mother." "He knew what your mother was. That's not the same as knowing her." Kane's hand found hers, steady despite the tremor that had started in his own since the confrontation. "Whatever he's implying, I don't fully understand it either. Not yet." "But you have a guess." "I have a guess I'm not ready to say out loud until I know it's true." He pulled her gently away from the tree line toward the fire. "Tonight is about you standing in this circle and the pack seeing you're not going anywhere." "I'm not going anywhere," she said, and meant it more than she expected to. Later, once the fire had burned low and most of the pack had drifted back toward the house, Kane walked her along the tree line instead, unhurried, like he wasn't ready to let the night end. "You did well tonight," he said. "Better than well. Sable doesn't approve of many people. She's already halfway to approving of you." You went very still back there when Callum said what he said about my mother. I didn't like watching him look at you like he already knew things about you that you don't know yourself. His voice had gone quieter. I didn't like it more than I probably should have. Jealous? Protective, he said, though the word came out slower than it should have. Possibly both. I haven't had much practice separating the two lately. They'd stopped walking without either of them deciding to, close enough now that Wren could feel the warmth radiating off him despite the cold night air, close enough to see the exact moment his eyes dropped, briefly, to her mouth before he caught himself and looked away. Kane. I know. Something almost like a laugh, entirely without humor in it. This isn't supposed to be complicated. Nothing about this has been simple since the letter arrived. No, he agreed, and for a moment neither of them moved. His hand came up, hesitant, and brushed a loose strand of hair back from her face, fingers lingering a moment too long against her cheek. Then, somewhere behind them, a branch cracked underfoot. Torrin, with theatrical patience, and the moment dissolved as quickly as it had built. Walk you back? Kane asked, stepping away. Please, Wren said, and told herself the disappointment she felt had no business being that sharp. Chapter 6. By the 10th day, Kane could no longer hide it and stopped trying. Wren found him at breakfast, struggling to read the newspaper he'd always managed effortlessly before, holding it at odd angles, squinting in daylight that shouldn't have required squinting at all. Your eyes, she said, sitting across from him without being asked. Getting worse, faster than the doctors predicted, for whatever that's worth, given that the doctors have never actually treated a curse before. He tried for lightness and mostly missed. Night vision's mostly gone now. Daylight's starting to blur at the edges, too. How long until... I don't know. Nobody knows. He set the newspaper down, gave up on it entirely, and looked at her instead with eyes that seemed, even now, to find her without effort. How does the pack handle it, watching you get worse every day? Badly, mostly. Sable's stopped arguing with me about succession plans, which somehow worries me more than when she was arguing. Torrin checks on me twice a day and pretends it's about training schedules. Rhea just watches, the way she watches everything, and doesn't say what she's thinking. He rubbed at his eyes. Nobody wants to say out loud that they're already grieving me a little. It seemed kinder, somehow, to just let them. That's not kindness. That's you deciding for everyone else how much pain they're allowed to show you. He looked at her for a long moment, something startled in his expression. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for you. I feel furious on your behalf, which is different. That got something close to a real laugh out of him, rusty from disuse. It happened that afternoon, in the training yard where Torrin had begun teaching her basic self-defense at Kane's quiet insistence. Torrin came at her harder than usual that day, testing something, and when his hand closed around her wrist a beat too rough, a beat too real, something inside her chest tore loose without warning. The world sharpened all at once, colors too vivid, sounds too loud, Torrin's heartbeat suddenly audible from 3 feet away. Her vision narrowed and flared gold at the edges, and a low sound rose in her own throat that she didn't recognize as belonging to her. Torrin released her instantly, hands raised. Easy, easy, I've got you. What just happened to me? Your wolf, Torrin said, wonder and wariness both plain on his face. First flash usually comes from fear or fury. You had both today, near enough. By the time Kane arrived, drawn by whatever instinct connected him to disturbances on his land, even with his failing eyes, the gold had already faded from her vision, but not from the memory of it. "Tell me everything," he said, kneeling in front of her, hands framing her face. "What did it feel like?" "Like something that's always been there, just waiting for permission. Callum was right, wasn't he, about what I am?" "It looks that way." Hope and fear tangled together in his expression, so tightly neither could win. The Rourke bloodline runs stronger in some descendants than others. Something about the bond forming, even partially, must have started waking it. Is that good or bad? There are old accounts of Rourke descendants who couldn't control the shift once it started. It took some of them faster than anyone expected. I don't want to lose you figuring out which kind of story we're living in. Then let's not wait to find out. Teach me. I want more of the real training, the kind that has something to do with what just happened to me in that yard. That's not a small thing to ask for. Neither is what's happening to both of us, Wren said. I'd rather run toward it than wait for it to decide things for me. That night, Wren found Kane on the back terrace, wrapped in a blanket against a cold he seemed to feel more sharply than before, watching a moon he could no longer fully see. "Can't sleep either," she said, settling beside him. "Story of my last 3 weeks." He glanced at her sideways. "Today scared me, watching you lose control like that." "You didn't seem scared. You seemed like a man who already knew exactly what to do." "I've had practice being calm in front of people who need me to be. Doesn't mean it's true underneath." He turned the blanket over his shoulders. "I watched you go somewhere I couldn't follow today, even for a few seconds. I don't like not being able to follow you places anymore." "I'm not scared of it. Not anymore. It felt like coming home to a room I didn't know was mine." That's either the most reassuring or the most terrifying thing you could have said to me right now, and I genuinely cannot tell which. She laughed, soft and surprised, and something in the sound seemed to undo whatever restraint he'd been holding on to since the clearing. He reached for her hand, and this time, neither of them pretended it was an accident. Wren. Her name in his mouth had stopped sounding strange days ago. Now it sounded like something closer to a question. "I know," she said, and closed the distance herself. The kiss, when it came, held none of the careful restraints of the wedding, none of the interrupted almost of the bonfire. His hand slid into her hair, hers found the collar of his shirt, and for one unguarded, breathless span of time, neither the curse nor the contract, nor the 30 days ticking down between them existed at all. When they broke apart, foreheads still touching, Kane, something that sounded almost like relief. "That felt real," he said quietly. "It was real," Wren said. "I think it has been, for a while." Chapter 7. The letter was hidden inside the lining of an old suitcase Rhea found in the attic storage, one of a handful of boxes marked with names Wren didn't recognize, pulled out during a search for anything the pack's records might have missed about the Rourke bloodline. "This was your mother's," Rhea said, handing it over with a gentleness that made Wren's chest ache before she'd even opened it. The suitcase held little: a few photographs, a moth-eaten scarf, a small leather journal with Della's handwriting slanting across every page, Familiar in a way that hit Wren harder than she expected, 14 years since she'd last seen that particular loop on the letter W. She read it alone, in her room, door locked, and by the third page her hands had started shaking. If you're reading this, then either I finally told you the truth myself, or something happened to me before I got the chance, and knowing how this family's luck runs, I suspect it's the second. You come from the Rourke line, Wren, the same family that cursed the Ashwood Alphas 120 years ago. I left before you were born because I saw what staying did to the women in our bloodline. Used every generation as leverage in a war we never chose to fight. I wanted better for you. I'm sorry it didn't work. If you're reading this at Ashwood House, it means the leaving wasn't enough, and I need you to understand something important. The bond between a Rourke and an Ashwood Alpha isn't just capable of breaking the curse, it's capable of killing the one who forms it, if the wolf inside them wakes too fast, too strong, before they're ready to carry it. 3 women in our family died completing that bond. I have no reason to believe you'd be the exception. Please, if you have any choice left at all, run. Wren set the journal down with hands that no longer felt entirely like her own, and sat with it a long while before she trusted herself to move at all. She thought about the apartment she'd grown up in, the mother who'd flinched at loud noises and kept the curtains drawn even in daylight, who'd taught her to read a room before she'd taught her to read a book, who'd vanished one night without a note and left Wren to build a childhood out of the silence afterward. None of it had made sense at the time. All of it made a terrible kind of sense now. I wanted you far away from Ashwood territory and everyone in it. And instead, here she was, married into the very house her mother had spent a lifetime running from. She found Kane in his study an hour later, and the words came out of her before she'd decided how to say them gently. My mother didn't just leave to protect me from Callum's family. She left because completing this bond might kill me. 3 women in my bloodline already died doing exactly what we're trying to do. Kane went very still. Show me. She handed him the journal, watched his failing eyes struggle and fail to focus on the page until he set it down, jaw tight, and asked her to read it aloud instead. By the end, something had gone hollow and grim in his expression. I didn't know, he said. I swear to you, Wren, if I'd known there was a version of this where completing the bond could cost you your life, I never would have let it get this far. I don't think you could have stopped it. I don't think I could have either, honestly. Not once I started noticing you the way I have. She wrapped her arms around herself, cold despite the fire in the hearth. But I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to let you push me into finishing a bond that might kill me just to save your wolf. I'm not asking you to. You wouldn't have to ask. That's the problem. 30 days is running out, and some part of both of us is going to start looking for the fastest way through this, whether we admit it out loud or not. Her voice cracked on the last words. I watched my mother run from this exact choice. I understand now why she did it. Wren, I need space. I need to think. She was already moving toward the door. I'm not leaving the property. I just need somewhere that isn't this house for a few hours. Wren, please. His voice cracked on her name in a way she'd never heard it crack before. All the careful alpha composure stripped away at once. Whatever you decide, even if it's to let the 30 days run out and let me deal with whatever comes after, I need you to know it wasn't a mistake, marrying you. Whatever else this curse has cost either of us, that part was never the mistake. She paused at the door, throat tight, and didn't trust herself to answer that the way it deserved. "I'll be back before dark," was all she managed instead. He didn't try to stop her, and that restraint, the fact that he let her go even now, even scared, even with everything at stake, was almost worse than if he'd argued. She walked until the tree line gave way to a ridge overlooking the whole valley, Ashwood House small and golden in the distance below, and sat on a cold rock with her mother's journal clutched against her chest, trying to decide which fear was larger, losing herself to a bond that might kill her, or losing Kane to a curse that definitely would. She didn't hear Callum approach until his shadow fell across the journal in her lap. "I did warn you there was more to the story," he said quietly. "No cruelty in it this time. I'm sorry it had to come from a dead woman's journal instead of from someone who could hold your hand through it." "Did you know about the women who died?" "I knew there was a risk. I didn't know the details your mother apparently did." He crouched a respectful distance away. "For what it's worth, I don't actually want you dead. I want the curse broken. And I want my family's century of grief to finally mean something. Those aren't always the same thing as wanting Kane Voss to win." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to survive whatever choice you make next," Callum said, and for the first time since she'd met him, she believed he meant it. He left her alone with that, and with the mountain going dark around her, and with the decision that no longer felt like it belonged only to her and Kane, but to every woman in her bloodline who'd faced this same impossible math and hadn't survived it. Chapter 8. She didn't make it back before dark, and that single broken promise was the reason Kane found the ridge empty when he came looking for her himself, half blind and furious with worry, an hour after the sun went down. Wren hadn't meant to stay so long. She'd sat with her mother's journal until the cold seeped into her bones and the valley below went from gold to gray to black. And by the time she stood to leave, 3 men were already standing between her and the tree-line home. "Miss Calloway." Callum's voice, though this time without the courtesy he'd shown her that afternoon. "I'm afraid I need to ask you to come with us." "You said you didn't want me dead." "I don't. I want you educated." He gestured, and the 2 men flanking him closed the distance before she could react, one gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. "Kane's been lying to you about the nature of this bond since the day you arrived. I think it's time someone showed you the truth instead of telling it to you." "Let go of me!" "Consider this a courtesy, Miss Calloway. I could have simply taken you while you were distracted with your grief. I chose to warn you first." Callum's tone stayed maddeningly gentle, as though he were discussing weather rather than an abduction. "My men will not hurt you. I've given very specific instructions." "That's supposed to reassure me?" "It's supposed to be honest with you, which is more than you've gotten from the Voss house in 3 weeks. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not quite cruelty, closer to conviction. "Fight it if you want to. Honestly, I'm counting on it." She fought. Whatever training Torin had drilled into her over the past week surfaced instinctively. An elbow driven back into a rib cage, a heel dragged hard across an instep, a twist of her wrist that nearly, almost, broke the grip on her arm. For a moment, she thought it might actually work. Then the second man closed in from her blind side, and 2 grown men with a century of strength behind them proved more than her human body alone could manage. Within moments, she was on her knees in the frost-hardened grass, arm wrenched painfully behind her back, cheek pressed hard against cold earth. That was when it happened. The fear didn't build slowly this time. it detonated, white-hot and total. And something ancient and furious answered the call from somewhere beneath her ribs, tearing loose with a violence that had nothing careful or controlled about it at all. Her vision flooded gold, every heartbeat around her suddenly audible, every scent suddenly a story, the man's grip on her arm suddenly, shockingly breakable. She broke it. He staggered back with a shout, and Wren rose to her feet feeling entirely unlike herself and entirely, terrifyingly, like herself for the first time in her life. Teeth sharper, senses roaring, a growl building low in her throat that came from somewhere far older than 26 years of careful, quiet humanity. "There she is," Callum said softly, almost reverent, taking a slow step back rather than forward. "There's the Rourke I've been waiting to meet." "Get away from me!" "I intend to. That was never the point of tonight." He held both hands up, retreating another step. "I wanted you to see it for yourself. What you're capable of, unassisted, without Kane Voss's curse pulling it out of you on his timeline instead of your own. You didn't need him for this, Wren. You never did." "You attacked me!" "I gave you a reason to stop hiding from what you are." Callum's men had already melted back toward the tree line, leaving him alone, watching her with something that looked disturbingly like pride. "The offer still stands. Come with me willingly. Learn what your bloodline actually is, away from a house built on the bones of a war your family started. I can teach you control. Kane can only teach you sacrifice." Wren's pulse was still roaring, gold still flickering at the edges of her vision, and for one terrible, vertiginous moment, some small and furious part of her considered it. Then she heard Kane's voice, hoarse and desperate, calling her name from somewhere in the dark tree line behind her, stumbling half-blind toward a fight he could barely see, and the gold in her vision guttered like a candle catching wind. "No," she said, steadier now, the wolf receding as quickly as it had surfaced. "I know exactly what I am now, and I know exactly who I'm choosing." Something shifted in Callum's expression, not anger, but a kind of resigned, weary sorrow. "Then I hope you're stronger than the women who came before you, because the 30 days are almost gone, and what's coming for both of you when they run out won't care which one of us you chose." He vanished into the dark, and moments later Kane broke through the tree line, catching her before her knees fully gave out, his hands shaking as badly as hers. "You're all right," he breathed, checking her over with a desperation that had nothing composed left in it at all. "Wren, are you hurt?" "I'm not hurt." She let herself lean into him fully, exhaustion and adrenaline crashing over her at once. "But I think we're out of time to figure this out slowly." He held her there a long moment, face buried against her hair. When he finally pulled back enough to look at her, his failing eyes still found hers with unsettling accuracy. "I felt it," he said quietly. "The moment your wolf surfaced. I was half a mile away and I felt it, like a hand closing around my chest. I don't fully understand what that means yet, but I don't think it's nothing." "What do you think it means?" "I think it means the bond is already further along than either of us realized." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I meant what I said in the study. I won't ask you to risk your life for mine. I'd rather lose the wolf than lose you finishing something you didn't choose freely. I know. Wren closed her eyes, letting his warmth ground her. That's exactly why I trust you enough to choose it anyway. Above them, the moon hung heavy and close, and somewhere past the tree line, the pack had begun to howl. Not in warning this time, but in something that sounded, unmistakably, like a call being answered. Chapter 9. The 30th day arrived gray and still, the whole mountain holding its breath the way it had the morning of the wedding, and Kane woke unable to see anything past the shape of his own hand. It's happening faster now, he told her, despite everything, sitting on the edge of their bed while she knelt in front of him. Sable estimates hours, not days. I don't want you to complete the bond out of fear. I don't want your last act as my wife to be a sacrifice you talked yourself into because the clock ran out. It's not a sacrifice if I want it. Do you want it? Or do you want to save me, which isn't quite the same question? Wren took his face in both hands. I want you. I wanted you before I understood any of this. I fell for the man who married a stranger and then spent every day afterward trying to protect her from a truth he was terrified would cost him her trust. That's not fear talking. That's just true. Something in his expression broke open, raw and unguarded. Then let's finish what we started. Rhea found them in the pack hall an hour later, where the old ceremony for completing a bond had been prepared with a solemnity that made the wedding look casual by comparison. Candles, an ancient text, Sable presiding with a gravity that had replaced her suspicion of Wren almost entirely. They never got the chance to finish it. Callum arrived with a dozen men behind him, forcing the doors wide before Torn could bar them, and the ceremony dissolved into chaos, Kane trying to push himself between Wren and the threat, despite his failing sight. I told you I'd be here for the ending, Callum said, striding into the candlelight, something wild and grieving in his eyes. 120 years my family has carried this curse forward, waiting for justice that never quite arrives. This isn't justice, Kane said, drawing himself up. This is just more of the same grief, passed down one more generation because nobody had the courage to end it. Says the woman standing in the middle of it, Wren said, stepping forward. Who gets to decide for herself what her own bloodline is used for, and who is done letting two men fight a war neither of them started. You don't understand what you're choosing, Callum said. If this bond isn't strong enough, isn't real enough, you could die completing it. Your mother knew that. I know it too. I read the journal. But I also know what happens if I don't try. I'm not willing to let fear be the reason nothing ever changes. For a long, suspended moment, nobody moved. Somewhere behind Callum, one of his men shifted his weight, hand drifting towards something at his belt, and Torrin's whole body coiled in response. Callum, Wren said his name. You told me on the ridge that you wanted me to survive whatever I chose. This is what I'm choosing. If that meant anything when you said it, prove it now. Something moved behind his eyes, a century of grief, looking for somewhere to finally set itself down. Then Callum, to the visible shock of everyone in the room, lowered his hands. Then finish it. Not because I forgive what my family lost, because I'm tired of watching it cost more lives than it's worth. Stand down, he added to his men, and the tension broke like a held breath released. The bond ceremony felt nothing like the wedding had. There was no judge, no folder of practiced words, only Kane's hands in hers, his failing eyes fixed on her face with a devotion that needed no sight to be absolute. "Whatever happens," Kane murmured, forehead pressed to hers. "Loving you was never part of the contract. I didn't plan for it. I wouldn't undo it, even now." "I love you too," Wren said, the words settling into place like something that had always belonged there. "Let's finish this, together." The wolf came for her differently this time. Not fear, not fury, but something warmer and infinitely stronger, rising to meet Kane's fading light rather than fleeing it. She felt it reach for him, felt some ancient part of her recognize some ancient part of him. And for one terrifying, exquisite moment, they stood at the edge of something neither fully understood, choosing to fall together instead of alone. Light, gold, then white, then something with no name at all, flooded the pack hall, and Wren felt herself come apart and reassemble in the space of a single heartbeat. Felt Kane's grief and hope and terror pour into her, exactly as her own poured into him, until the line between where she ended and he began blurred into something neither of them needed to locate anymore. When it faded, Kane was on his knees in front of her, both hands still holding hers, and when he opened his eyes, they found her instantly, sharp, clear, gray, entirely restored. "I can see you," he breathed. "Wren, I can see you." Around them, the pack hall erupted, Sable's composure finally cracking into open tears, Torn's fist raised in triumph, Rhea's hand pressed hard against her own mouth. Even Callum, standing near the shattered doors, looked, for one unguarded moment, almost at peace, as though some weight his family had carried for 4 generations had finally, quietly, set itself down. "It worked," Wren said, feeling the wolf settle inside her like something finally, fully home. Not a wild, ungoverned thing anymore, but something steady, something hers. "Kane, it actually worked." "Because you chose it," he said, solid and whole and no longer fading. "Because you chose me. That's the part the curse never accounted for. That's the part nobody could force." Outside, the whole mountain began to howl, not in mourning this time, and not in warning, but in something that sounded for the first time in 120 years, unmistakably, like celebration. Chapter 10. Austin. 3 weeks after the bond took hold, Ashwood House looked like a different place entirely. Not because the stone and glass had changed, but because Wren had, and the house seemed to know it, welcoming her now the way it had only ever tolerated her before. She stood on the same back terrace where Kane had once watched a moon he could no longer see, watching instead this morning as Callie's rental car wound up the long mountain drive, 3 months of treatment and $200,000 having done exactly what Wren had prayed it would. "She's stronger than she sounds on the phone," Kane said, appearing beside her with 2 mugs of coffee, his eyes finding hers instantly, effortlessly, the way they had every single day since the bond. "You've told her everything?" "Everything." Wren smiled, remembering the 3-hour phone call it had taken, Callie's shock giving way slowly to something like delight. "She wants to meet Rhea. Apparently, she looked her up online and decided they'd be friends." The car pulled to a stop, and Callie emerged slower than she used to, but steadier than Wren had seen her in over a year, color back in her cheeks. Wren crossed the lawn without waiting, and the sisters collided in an embrace that neither tried to make graceful. "You look Amazing, Wren said, holding her at arm's length. You look married, Callie shot back, eyeing the ring, then Kane, then the enormous house behind him. Married and also apparently capable of turning into a wolf, which is going to come up at every family gathering for the rest of both our lives. Kane crossed the lawn to join them, and Callie's eyes went comically wide the moment he was close enough to properly assess. Okay, she said, looking between the two of them. I fully expected my sister's mystery-rich husband to be some sad, controlling weirdo, and instead he's... She gestured vaguely. This. Wren. You didn't tell me he looked like that. Kane, to his credit, only laughed, low and easy. It's good to finally meet you, he said, offering his hand, which Callie ignored entirely in favor of pulling him into a hug that visibly caught him off guard. Thank you, she said, quieter now, for saving my life. I know that's not really how any of you would put it, but that's what happened, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Kane's arms came up slowly around her. You're family now, he said simply. That's not a debt. That's just what's true. The pack held a gathering that evening, smaller than the bonfire, warmer somehow for its size. No test in it this time, just celebration. Sable pulled Wren aside early, pressing something small and cool into her palm. A silver pendant, old and worn, shaped like a crescent moon. This belonged to the first Ashwood mate who ever willingly chose her alpha, rather than being chosen for her, Sable said. I've been keeping it for the next person who earned it. Thank you, Wren said, and meant it more than the simple words could carry. Torrin found her by the fire an hour later, offering nothing more than a nod and a proud smile before disappearing back into the crowd, and Rhea raised her glass in a silent, private toast that needed no explanation. Even news of Callum, when it came a few days later, carried none of the bitterness Wren had expected. He'd withdrawn his men entirely, sent no further threats, and had begun the quiet work of rebuilding something out of a family legacy that had known nothing but grief for 4 generations. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. Later, Kane found Wren back on the terrace, wrapped in the same blanket he'd once needed against a cold he could barely feel anymore. Regrets? He asked, settling beside her. Not one. She leaned into him, the wolf inside her settling easy now, at home. You? I regret 3 weeks of a very bad marriage contract that I thought was going to be the loneliest arrangement of my life. I don't regret a single second of what it actually turned into. For the record, when the letter first arrived, I thought it was a scam. I almost threw it in the trash. For the record, when I wrote it, I told myself I was doing it purely out of desperation. I didn't let myself hope for anything more than survival. And now? Now, I catch myself thinking about things I never used to let myself think about. Growing old. Whether Callie would let us take her camping once she's fully well. What it would be like to have a daughter with your stubbornness and my terrible bedside manner. He shook his head, almost sheepish. 30 days ago, I was planning a succession strategy for a pack I assumed I wouldn't live to lead much longer. Now I'm planning camping trips. It's a strange kind of whiplash. A good kind? The best kind I've ever had. He turned to look at her, really look at her. Sight restored, but seeing her, she suspected, more clearly now than his eyes alone could ever explain. I think the curse gave me 30 days to save my life, he said, and somehow, completely by accident, It gave me a lifetime instead. Above them, the moon hung full and bright, and for the first time since Wren had arrived at Ashwood House, the howls that rose up from the mountainside sounded exactly like what they were. Not a warning, not a curse unwinding in the dark, but a whole pack, finally, singing something that sounded remarkably like home. That's where Kane and Wren's story ends. But it's only the beginning for them. If this one kept you listening until the last chapter, hit subscribe. A new werewolf romance audiobook drops every week. Tell me in the comments, which part stayed with you the longest? Thank you for listening. I'll see you at the next full moon.